Splendid evening it is to viewers. Welcome to Equity News on EquityAxis, your area perspective of stock market developments and of developments in the Zimbabwean economy. Thank you for joining us as we broadcast live from our Hampton studios. I'm Eben Mabunda. Let's get started. As the nation grapples with energy and power crisis, ZESA laments the weakening exchange rate, which has made it difficult for the utility provider to service the nation in as far as the pegging of the electricity tariffs are concerned. Parliament Portfolio Committee's oral evidence on pre-budget consultations with regards to energy and power developments held a session in the capital this morning, with the Energy and Power Development Ministry being quizzed on the operations of the entity. Expressed is the fact that ZESA is currently in engagements with Mozambique's HCB to source electricity imports from beyond our eastern border. EquityAxis team was on the ground. Let's have a look.
It's where we can actually we're not able to buy enough coal, to buy enough diesel, to pay for water on time. We made an appeal to the government for a review of the tariff, and they've also made a proposal to government. I think that is very critical, that in an environment of exchange rate instability, our tariff should have what we call a tariff adjustment formula that will kick in each time there is a movement in terms of one of the critical variables like exchange rate. What if we don't do that? Each time they review the tariff, 2 weeks down the line we are back to square one. So we just hoping that the government will be able to do something about it, because we're in a critical situation. He talked about shortage of power, and we're importing from ESCOM. We've signed an agreement, we're getting power. The agreement gives us 50 up to 400 megawatts, 50 on a firm basis, 300 non-firm. We have also signed an agreement with EDM. We signed it last week. We're getting 50 firm and 100 on a non-firm basis. We are discussing with HCB. At the moment, we're not sure exactly what we're going to get, but we believe that something will come out.
ZESA has also suffered exchange rate losses amounting to $4 billion on the back of recent currency adjustments, particularly SI 142, which reintroduced the Zimbabwean dollar and obliterated the multi-currency regime. Let's have a look at the footage from that particular session.
We also have problems relating to the exchange rate itself, because we have huge loans, more than 600 million. So for reporting purposes, their finance costs are attached to the loans. Each time there's a movement, the exchange losses. So as I'm talking now, we now have exchange losses amounting to 4 billion. So the figures that I expect to see at the end of this financial year are quite horrendous. So we just have to manage the situation, but perhaps we can manage it through the tariff adjustment formula that I talked about, the shortage of foreign currency I talked about, the discontinuance of the multi-currency system has introduced another dimension. We have loans which require us to have extra accounts, and extra accounts are supposed to be in US dollars.
As the 2019-2020 agricultural season approaches, Treasury has launched a new financing model for the agricultural sector. Government has transformed the financing for command agriculture, bringing in commercial banks as well as private sector outgrower schemes. AGRIC, CBZ, Stanbic are on board already, with more banks expected to be a part of that particular development. In the setup, government will provide guarantees to the banks in order for them to lend to farmers. The farming financing model applies to special grain and oilseed encompassing maize, wheat and soybeans. Zimbabwe is currently grappling with a humanitarian crisis, with over 5 million people in Zimbabwe in need of food aid. Following yesterday's ruling by the High Court to suspend the 2% intermittent tax, the Minister of Finance says the 2% tax will remain in effect. This, he said, on the basis of Statutory Instrument 205 of 2018, which was validated under the Finance Act by the Parliament. The 2% tax was introduced on the 1st of October 2018 and is in line with the Treasury's for prosperity. EcoCash suspends 4,000 agents for charging excessive premiums. EcoCash has over 50,000 EcoCash agents across the country, and in line with the calls made by government to have action taken against excessive premiums running north of 60%, EcoCash has finally made adjustments. Still, in the telecoms industry, Tel1 has unveiled more content through its digital platform, the DOD. Tel1 will now offer free viewing, new movie channels, as well as 18 locally produced titles during the course of this month. Now, this concludes our evening news bulletin. Up next is a look at the stock markets in Markets Daily. Don't go anywhere.
Climbing to the top takes more than just hard work and smart choices. It's the passion that drives you from within, the endurance to keep going through difficult times, and having a very clear vision of how to succeed. That's what we strive for at CBZ. We're a diversified and innovative listed financial services group in Zimbabwe with a complete range of activities including banking, short and long-term insurance, asset management, and property investments. CBZ has been a pinnacle for stability in the economic landscape of Zimbabwe, stemming from our deep-rooted values, our excellent customer service delivery, and our corporate vision to strive for excellence as a global competitor. Our continuous investment in research and development will cement our promise to provide customer convenience utilizing state-of-the-art technology. Relationships are at the core of what we do. We understand, however, that strong, long-lasting partnerships are not built overnight. With over 3 decades of wealth management, we have come to understand our clients and their specific investment requirements. Our unique mix of skills ensures that investment opportunities are examined from all perspectives. The balancing rocks of Zimbabwe have weathered the elements for thousands of years and stood the test of time, like majestic reminders of the fine balance of nature. They challenge our perception of what is possible and what endures. Just as CBZ has weathered the economic storms and remained steadfast throughout the turbulence of unsettled economies. Achieving the impossible through resilience and stability, we balance the elements of hard work, dedication, and experience, making us your ideal partner for success. Climbing to the top takes more than just hard work and smart choices. It's the passion that drives you from within, the endurance to keep going through difficult times, and having a very clear vision of how to succeed. That's what we strive for at CBZ. We're a diversified and innovative listed financial services group in Zimbabwe with a complete range of activities including banking, short and long-term insurance, asset management, and property investments. CBZ has been a pinnacle for stability in the economic landscape of Zimbabwe, stemming from our deep-rooted values, our excellent customer service delivery, and our corporate vision to strive for excellence as a global competitor. Our continuous investment in research and development will cement our promise to provide customer convenience utilizing state-of-the-art technology. Relationships are at the core of what we do. We understand, however, that strong, long-lasting partnerships are not built overnight. With over 3 decades of wealth management, we have come to understand our clients and their specific investment requirements. Our unique mix of skills ensures that investment opportunities are examined from all perspectives. The balancing rocks of Zimbabwe have weathered the elements for thousands of years and stood the test of time, like majestic reminders of the fine balance of nature. They challenge our perception of what is possible and what endures. Just as CBZ has weathered the economic storms and remained steadfast throughout the turbulence of unsettled economies. Achieving the impossible through resilience and stability, we balance the elements of hard work, dedication, and experience, making us your ideal partner for success.
Review and welcome back, viewers. It's our time for news review, and joining me to discuss what we've just reported is Chief Analyst Respect Kwenzi. Respect, good evening and welcome to the show.
It's always my pleasure, Eben. Thank you.
Beautiful. Quite several interesting developments. I think let's start with the juicier part, which is how that the Minister of Finance has issued a presser to the effect that there is a co-opting of the private sector where command agriculture is concerned. Your take with that is concerned?
I think you should have given me a background of what this whole issue is all about.
Okay. According to the press statement, what has actually transpired is government is bringing in local banks to assist with the funding for command agriculture in light of the 2019-2020 agricultural season. Also, in addition to that, government will guarantee the loans that the banks will actually pour into the rebranding exercise of that particular command agriculture that we've got for 2019-2020. So, in a nutshell, that will actually explain what it is that we have actually received in communication. At the same time, the Minister of Information has also issued a statement. I think there appears to have been what is a misinterpretation on the part of the masses, but the message out there is very clear. The Minister of Finance has roped in banks to help finance command agriculture while also providing what seems to be a guarantee to try and revamp the command agricultural scheme. So that is the development that we actually have at hand.
Okay, thank you. So the background here, from what I understand, is that over the past at least 4 years, government has pursued a deliberate plan to finance agriculture in Zimbabwe through a program which they called Command Agriculture. But on top of that, there's a presidential input scheme which also helps farmers in terms of sourcing their inputs for farming. But generally, if you look over the past 10 years, farmers have failed to solicit funds directly from banks. But the real issue here is their inability has been caused by the lack of title deeds to their land, which has made it difficult for banks to loan them money on land which is not guaranteed that by the day or by the end of the season it will still belong to them. And so this has been one of the major key challenges to funding of agriculture. And where still there has been low yields across a number of crops. Much of the grains that are believed to be the strategic grains are not of good yields in terms of local farming. So this has been the key background. And if you look at the most immediate season, we had a drought, and obviously it affected the major crop. But key crops like wheat, they remain a challenge. Soybean, they remain a challenge as well. Cotton as well. So I think government is now moving towards co-optation of the private sector in terms of funding these activities, mainly to so as to allow themselves fiscal space to focus on managing other fiscal matters which are not necessarily the things that the productive sector or the banks can capitalize on. But this move also comes on the background of what the Minister of Finance had said in his 2019 budget, that we are taking away funding from command agriculture, which has grossly been abused, and largely it has not retained in fact, it has weighed on the nation's fiscus. So this is the key background. So he said going forward, he would envisage a situation where the private sector would also come in and help finance agriculture in Zimbabwe. So a few banks have shown interest as of to date, which is CBZ, AGRIC, the Stanbic as well. So I think if you look at the 2 of the banks out of the 4 that have been co-opted so far, they've got a government relationship already. And so you wouldn't say it's actually a very deliberate move. And so they're hoping that maybe in the few days to come, they might see additional banks coming to to the party as well.
But my question would be, would this bring a degree of efficiency in the manner in which the command agriculture is run?
I don't really think so. Farming is a skill. It's something that is not dependent on your ability to be followed through or something like that. It's not necessarily that if a bank gives you money, then you're supposed to perform. You perform based on fundamentals, you perform based on your skills, based on the availability of course, inputs, your skills to actually do good farming. I think those are the yardsticks and measures that can guarantee your success. But I think the coming into matrix of banks will actually put an impression on the data or on the people that will acquire the funding to actually be more serious with their farming activities. Why? Because over the past 20 years, since we started pursuing our land redistribution, there has never been private participation in that space, except for tobacco, which has attracted significant value chain or significant funding via merchants and so forth. But I think it won't necessarily result in improved yields or improved payability of loans and so forth. I think my own assessment is that this is still a very dangerous model for banks. Why? Because if you don't have security over an asset that you have financed, it simply means your exposure or your risk exposure is very high. So when your risk exposure is very high, it means your non-performing loans might come in even at a very significant level. It's not enough for government to say we provide a guarantee for these loans. Why? Because government can only guarantee or pay back in terms of treasury bills, and we all know what treasury bills have done to this market. They are the real reason why we are in a de-dollarized state. They are the reason why government is in an escalated fiscal deficit levels as we have experienced over the past 4 years. So this instrument has been abused. This instrument can even cause more problems in later years when banks have got increased exposure to such an instrument, and it would even put the financial sector at a serious risk. But I think one other interesting aspect when you're looking at this model of financing, what happens if the private sector comes to play? They finance the whole value chain based on off-take agreement. Because I think strategic grains are they're different from other crops. Why? Because there's always high demand for them. That's why they're strategic in any way. Because you always know that cooking oil producers will always want soybean in order for you to soybean oil, process it into what? Into cooking oil. So there's always ready demand. There's always ready demand for maize and so forth, and wheat for bread. But a bulk of those crops we were actually importing. So what it means is there will be a lot of off-take agreements. This is some initiatives which have been tried by Nat Foods, URL, Pure Drop, and so forth. They've been funding or financing farmers in an off-take agreement. They would say, we finance your produce, but we'll take it at the point of sale. But now what happens when the economy suddenly is disrupted like it is right now? URL goes out of business, Pure Drop closes shop like it did last year, volumes are coming off, demand is significantly down. Will you stay true to your funding commitments? It means that the bank which has financed the farmer will become exposed despite the off-take agreement. So I think our market is not yet ripe for such. And when you look at average yields in the market across so many crops, including maize, we sit at an average yield per hectare of less than 2-3 tons, which is below regional averages. And I think it's very gross. If you look at South Africa, they are close to 10 tons per ton, 10 tons. So I think those such yields are really needed in order for us to start talking of real value here.
Interesting. Still talking about Treasury and this particular initiative. Yesterday we saw former Finance Minister taking the matters to the High Court, and High Court ruled against the 2% tax. The Minister then coming back to say, look, on the basis of Statutory Instrument 205 of 2018, under the Finance Act, this whole 2% tax is upheld. Your take on the conflict there?
I think this is purely a legal matter. In terms of whether it was done right or wrong, I think it would need somebody who is a professional in that field. But my own appreciation of how law works, the minimal appreciation that I have. I've been closely following Brexit in the UK, and over the past 2 weeks, a Scottish Supreme Court actually ruled against Boris Johnson's move to prorogate Parliament, which is just a move to suspend Parliament over the next 4 weeks, and that was deemed illegal by that Supreme Court. I think there was a High Court elsewhere as well, which had ruled in favor of the move. So now there is that situation where the Supreme Court of England, not Scotland, the Supreme Court of England now has to rule on the appeal that has been made on the former decision that was made by the High Court and the Supreme Court of Scotland, which is quite minor in that way. But so I think it's a global phenomenon. Whenever a High Court rules, there's room for appeal at the Supreme Court, and such matters of high importance are definitely subject to such maneuvers. What I have a problem with is a minister who comes and interprets the law. It's not for you and me to interpret what should have been done. It's the minister's job to say, I uphold what the courts have said at High Court level, but I will immediately make an appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will suspend the judgment that would have been made by the High Court to say, up until we have had this matter at Supreme level, the 2% tax should be upheld. It should still be paid. It's not for anyone to tell us that it's SI, that of that. So it doesn't matter. What matters is that due process is followed. You may be right, I may be wrong. Tendai BT may be right, Tulingube may be right at a certain point, but it's for the courts to decide. What the courts have decided today is that what was done was wrong, and therefore the decision to institute a 2% tax have to be immediately stopped, unless if the minister goes to the Supreme Court to appeal on what would have been determined by the lower court, which is the higher court in this matter. Only until then can the Supreme Court make a decision to suspend what the lower court has done. So I think that's basically what is, instead of bothering us with a lot of SI that and SI that according to that and that, Parliament did that. I think we don't care about that. We care about, at the end of the day, what the Supreme Court says is law. If they said what it did is good, then that's it.
I realize. Well, moving on to another story. Of course, the Parliamentary Committee on Energy and Power Development looked into the operations of ZESA as well as the ministry. And one of the key issues they highlighted by ZESA is the fact that ZESA has lost about $4 billion in exchange rate losses on the back of currency adjustments. They've also, of course, lamented how that there has been the effects of a weakening exchange rate in as far as their pricing. So they've been calling for, the implementation of another strategy altogether where the pegging of the tariffs are concerned.
Yeah, I think if you are dealing with a product which you are purely importing, then there is obviously room for either missing out on the exchange rate or positively gaining from the exchange rate. Because when the new rates were pegged, which is about June thereabout, in the mid-term fiscus review, I think that's when the new tariffs were announced. What effectively happened is that these were actually pegged against a certain exchange rate, and that exchange rate has fallen by over 30 to 40% since then. And effectively, it has meant that if you have pegged at 8 and the rate is now at 12, you have lost about 30%. If it's more, then you're actually adding on to that. So in terms of your net outflows, what you're going to pay to import that ZESA, you are actually paying, if you are paying 4 million, it means you're actually paying 12 million. So your exchange loss becomes 8 million to make it 12, because the rate is moved by a certain margin. So this simply reflects the kind of macroeconomic challenges that we have to say the exchange rate is weakening by the day, and it's not really economic for government to keep on subsidizing importation of critical commodities. But at the same time, I think we have to ask ourselves to say, what should government do to stabilize the exchange rate? Because it is their duty to stabilize an exchange rate. It's a duty of the government to have enough forex reserves. It's the duty of a government to have adequate or sustainable money supply levels in the economy. It's the duty of the government to have a clean fiscal position. If you fail to have these, then it would lead to a drastic loss in the value of your money. And we can't put it squarely on the table of participants in the market or basically business players to say, why have you lost value? It's squarely in government's own play field.
I realize. We're just going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have a look at the stock markets. I know that this currency one is quite an interesting one. We'll get onto that once we come back from the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back, viewers. It's now time for Markets Daily, and still with me instead, of course, is Respect Gwenzi, who's the chief analyst with us here at EquityAxis. Now, on to the stock markets. The stock markets continues to recover after a series of losses in the past weeks, with the all-share index gaining 2% to 176.99 points. The industrials index up 2.03% to 589.45 points. Top 10 index up 2.27%. All the players in that field have either inched higher or they remain constant. On the constant side of BAT, Old Mutual, as well as National Foods, all the other 7 counters in there have actually inched up in terms of the value in today's session. Then, of course, moving on to other players there, particularly the fallers and the risers. We've seen an interesting trend with FML gaining a good 20% to 30 cents there. Then we've also seen NMB gaining 20%, 10 all gaining 19.17%. Edgar's gaining 18.38%. It seems as though the first 4 have gained by a margin of just about 20%. In an interesting development there. On the fallers, there is ZHL as well as Ariston. But let's have a conversation about FML as well as NMB that have gained 20%. Let's start by having a look at NMB that has gained a good 20%. What do these trends reflect?
Yeah, so basically we are seeing the 9th consecutive session of gains on the stock market. And that's quite huge because we're coming from a background where the stock market has been drastically falling. In fact, the stock market went on for 5 weeks of loss making before rising over the prior week. So we are currently enjoying a recovery of the market, but I think it also shows some volatility that has been going on, because whenever you see the market coming off and up, it really shows you that there is a lot of uncertainties in the market. There's a ready shock. I mean, people are actually highly responsive to some of these macroeconomic developments. In a more stable market, you find gains that are quite mild. And when you look at the past 5 sessions alone, we have actually gone up by over 9%, and that's quite huge when you're looking at the stock market. So I think we are in a very interesting phase, but most of these gains are actually, if you look at the trends on the currency side, whereas you also get to look on the trends on the stock market side, there's a clear relationship here. We are seeing a huge gravitation in terms of currency losses, the ZIM dollar against the USD, and definitely this drives people into risk aversion. You wouldn't want to leave your money naked. And when you look at the exchange, the inflation rate, it's also soaring very high. Purchasing power is eroded every single day. So automatically you would expect investors to try to push their money into where they believe they can restore residual value. And these are counters, mainly stocks, but I think there's also been a movement into counters that are diversified from the local market. We are looking at exporting businesses. Your Ariston is very unfortunate that today it fell by about 16-point-something%. Yesterday it was the top riser, going up by over 20% to a price of about 9.7 thereabout. Today it's actually a marginal knock. It actually came off by that margin. But if you look broadly at the kind of losers, the kind of gainers that we have had on the stock market, it's people getting into Padenga, people getting into Mikos, people getting into Ariston, people getting into Old Mutual. These are counters that are divorced from what happens on the macroeconomic setup of Zimbabwe. So if you want an exposure in real foreign currency generating companies, it means you have to be looking at those companies that will retain value. Why? Because when you start to redo their earnings, you have to factor in the exchange gains, which are basic money that's gained out of having operations outside Zim. First Mutual as well. This is a company that's actually developing in markets that are outside Zim. They've got a Botswana unit. They've got they're writing reinsurance business from as many as 5 to 7 countries outside Zim. So they're basically diversified in that respect.
Tenor as well has been talking about.
Tenor has been talking about exporting into the region. So I think you can see the semblance of the kind of companies that are generating interest in the current move towards consolidation into shares. But
now, Edgar's, of course, there's been that significant gain, 18%. Could that be perhaps the influence of a new ownership? I mean, there's been talk that the South African unit sold off its shareholding, to another party. Of course, they held more than 35% in
so it was the majority shareholder. But to really think that's quite positive, I wouldn't basically take it like that, because if you look at how Edgar's has been performing over the past years, they now have got rights to Jet, and they also have got rights to the Edgar's brand. So I think as an entity with brands, they're quite strong, but you equally need a strong parent as well to survive in such harsh times. It would also always give you value to have a partner or a parent who always chips in with new ideas, just as Edcon has sold the Jet brand, which I think is emerging across Africa, the trends that they're generating as well. I think those were quite positive to the success story of Edgar's. It actually redeemed the Edgar's brand. I wouldn't think Edgar's as a brand would have survived on its own without the inclusion of Jet lately. The feel, the trendy lifestyle, the trendy clothes that are characterized by Jet, I think Edgar's was quickly losing that. So you obviously need a parent who is strong in the respect of coming out with technical expertise as well as the funding side as well.
Okay, now let's get on to the currency movement.
Sure.
I mean, pandemonium that is actually spelling out there. Of course, on the interbank it's at 1:14.13. On the parallel market, it's 19.55. And that's the average that we're actually playing out there.
That's pure carnage. That's really pure carnage. In an article today, I think I spelled out clearly my thoughts in terms of what I think in terms of the fiscal and the monetary policy of the economy. On the baseline, I think our policies have clearly failed in terms of the monetary and the fiscal side. If you cannot rein in inflation, then every other parameter is bound not to play to your tune. Why? Because inflation causes a repricing of the cost model or the cost center of any such endeavor that you may want to have. So, for example, if you have budgeted to expend 20 billion, like we have done this year, when inflation kicks in, it actually re-rates your own cost base. And so when your cost base actually goes up, it means you are bound to be spending more than what you are likely to get. And when that happens, it means there's a budget deficit, and that budget deficit needs to be funded. It has been our problem. It will remain to be our problem. I think Mutuli Ngube aired on one thing. When he came and introduced austerity measures, he was supposed to have first cleared the base for a stable currency. What he would have opted for, rather, once he had purposed himself to pursue austerity, was to ensure that there's a stable currency against which he could speed up his austere measures, because you need a stable base on which to plan, on which to budget, on which to reprice or redo your accounts. So what he effectively did by rattling the monetary side of the economy was to give himself two problems. So Zimbabwe presently is facing two critical problems, one being inflation and the other being an economic recession. So those two problems are emanating from policy measures that have austere policy measures which have seen a contraction both in demand and a contraction on the, a surge on the other side in terms of prices.
I realize. Well, thank you so much for the perspectives. Respect. Thank you, viewers, for staying with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and to visit our informative website, www.equityaxis.com.